Mr. Liaquat Merchant, Senator Quaid-e-Azam, ladies and gentlemen, I can see an occasional lady here. We deliberately kept this small because this place is small, and therefore we arranged for live streaming, and therefore whatever is happening here is going out live to a lot of places. We looked at a lot of, Commodore Sid Malik has talked about the Institute of Nation Building. We looked at what was happening from time to time at the Qaidam Mazar, where people go there for a photo opportunity. But, we found that there was no real learning for which we could convey or could be conveyed to the younger generation of Pakistan as to how it all came into being. So we came across an idea of having the grandnephew of the man who created Pakistan, Liaquat Merchant, speak about Allama Iqbal, the person who had the vision for Pakistan, and have the grandson of Allama Iqbal talk about the Quaid-e-Azam, the man who created Pakistan. And I think that was to get to the real roots of where we started from in 1940. And I think I'm very grateful to both Liaquat and Senator Iqbal. Without hesitation, without this thing, by the time I had finished the sentence, they said yes to it. And Senator Iqbal just came back from abroad and he's just flown in for this occasion only. And so I'm grateful. And in these circumstances, I'm very grateful. What do we see happening around us? And I'm not going to comment on the political side or the economic side, etc. But really, where are we today? How far are we away from 1940? Leave aside 1947. How far are we away from the dreams and the aspirations that our forefathers thought about? And we really need to go back to the roots. And what better than these two to be talking about it? I'm very grateful to Liaquat. Liaquat was very unwell in the morning, really very unwell. And he said that I will not be able to make it, but I will try. But later on he said. So in the meantime, I was thinking about what to do because Senator Iqbal was already here. So I then, you say, we in the armed forces learned ke pakhpal bandobast, do a quick one. And I rang up Dr. Adam and requested him. And so, more than me, what I'm going to do is that, moderation aside, after Liaquat has said his piece and Senator Iqbal, let's see, I am going to request Dr. Irfan Haider to say a few words on both the Quaid and the Allama Iqbal and comment on their speeches. Right? And after that, of course, we'll have a question and answer session. So, without further ado, I request now Liaquat to kick off and talk about the Allama Iqbal.
Assalamu alaikum. Ikram Sehgal, Chairman of Karachi Council on Foreign Relations, Vice Chairman of the Board of Management, Commodore Sid Malik, Senator Quaid-e-Azam, son of the illustrious Allama Iqbal, distinguished guests. Before I embark upon saying what little I know about Allama Iqbal, what I have read, my specialized topic has been Jinnah all my life. But whatever I know about Allama Iqbal, before I get to that, I would like to exchange some pleasantries. I met Walid Iqbal for the first time today, and I hope to get to know him better as years go on. But I had the great honor and distinction of knowing his late father, Justice Javed Iqbal. Justice Javed Iqbal shared a platform with me in 2006 at Beach Luxury Hotel. We both spoke on the same platform on Jinnah, both of us. And once again in 2007 when we invited him as our chief guest for the Jinnah Award ceremony at Karachi. So at two occasions, he honored us by visiting our house and having dinner with me and my wife. Justice Nasser Iqbal, his wife, also accompanied him to our house, and we were indeed very, very pleased and honored to meet both of them. So this is about the general background, that I have known your father in those days. Coming back to the topic which Ikram Saigal has chosen for today, I would begin by saying simply that while Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah is considered as Pakistan's founding father, I consider Allama Iqbal as the ideological father of Pakistan. Ideological because he was the one man who conceived of a separate Muslim state comprising of Sindh, Balochistan, Punjab and frontier in 1930. Way back in 1930, he conceived of this idea. He did not name it Pakistan. He called it a separate independent Muslim state where the Muslims of India could rise and achieve their goals. Prior to that, we had Sir Syed Ahmad Khan in Aligarh, who started the movement in support of the Muslims. In 1939, Mr. Jinnah made his last will and testament from Bombay, in which he left large sums of money mainly to educational institutions, which included Aligarh Muslim University, Sindh Madrasa and Islamia College, Peshawar. The reason why he did that and also prepared and moved a trust, the Dawn Trust. Dawn was established by Jinnah. He established the Dawn Trust for one main reason. He wanted the Muslims of India to receive educated public opinion on all matters concerning India and the Muslim world. So that motivated him to establishing a trust. So here you see the two great leaders, Allama Iqbal, who in 1930 conceived of the idea of Pakistan. Later in 1932-33, Chaudhry Rahmat Ali, he was a barrister as well from England. In 1933, Chaudhry Rahmat Ali drew up a paper, a pamphlet, and circulated all over the place, in which he identified these four portions in India which Allama Iqbal had identified, and he called it Pakistan for the first time. In 1933, that pamphlet is there and it's called Pakistan. The idea was the same as Allama Iqbal, the idea was the same as Jinnah. They wanted the Muslims to live there and thrive and achieve their goals, which I believe from what they said and did was to achieve political and economic independence and to freely practice and propagate their religious faith and beliefs. Having said that, what is the connection between Jinnah and Iqbal? Iqbal was an ideological person, a famous poet, Pakistan's national poet. He inspired people. He did not go out into the political fray. And when I say political fray, I do not mean the political fray we are witnessing today in Pakistan. Politics was very much more decent in those days and dignified. So he was the one who inspired Jinnah. I mean, Jinnah went away from India in 1936 to England and got fed up with politics and didn't want to come back. It was Iqbal who persuaded him to come back. In fact, before I go any further, there are several letters exchanged between Jinnah and Iqbal during the 30s. And the one that I consider relevant is the one which he wrote to Jinnah on 21st of June 1937. in which Allama Iqbal said to Jinnah in a letter, "You are the only Muslim in India today to whom the community has a right to look up for safe guidance through the storm which is coming to the northwest India and perhaps to the whole of India." So this is the faith and the trust which Allama Iqbal, the founding father of Pakistan, the man who conceived Pakistan, writes to Jinnah, "You are the only man who Muslims can look to for guidance to achieve their hopes and aspirations and guide them through this." Unfortunately for all of us in Pakistan, Allama Iqbal passed away, if I am not wrong, in 1938. In 1938, very prematurely of some illness which he contracted in one of his tours, and he succumbed to it. Very unfortunate. But let there be no doubt in the minds of everybody here present here today and everybody in Pakistan that Pakistan has two national heroes, Allama Iqbal and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. There is no doubt about that. They are both rank on the same footing, and they both deserve to be idolized and remembered at every stage in our lives. But for Allama Iqbal, but for Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and but for the Pakistan resolution passed on 23rd March 1940 at Lahore, you and I would not be sitting here today as free citizens of a Muslim independent sovereign state. So, gentlemen, I don't think there are any ladies present here. There are. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to once again reiterate that we in Pakistan, we means all Pakistanis, owe a debt of gratitude to Allama Iqbal for his guidance on the concept of a Muslim state, and to Jinnah for having struggled over the years, led the battle with the communists, the British, and gave us our dreamland home state of Pakistan. On a lighter side, through the works that I have done since for the last 25-30 years, as a student in India, when I was taken to meet Mr. Jinnah at the age of 7 by my grandmother, I didn't know what Jinnah was about, and I didn't know what Pakistan was about. We only saw a tall, lanky man in a white suit coming and shaking hands with us and going away. Well, my interest was not there either in Pakistan in those days in Bombay. My interest developed only when I met Fatima Jinnah in 1964. And that's when she told me, "What are you wasting your time in India? Come here. This is the country you should be living in." Very blunt. She said, "Why are you wasting your time in India?" Anyway, then ultimately I did migrate. I was working with my uncle Jinnah's nephew in Bombay, practicing law. I did migrate here. But the interest in Jinnah and in Pakistan really overcame me in 1980 when the High Court appointed me as administrator of the estate of Quaid-e-Azam. That is when the interest started germinating and it picked hold. And till today, it has gone stronger and stronger and stronger, and I wish to continue with this interest and this campaign as long as I live. So, before I conclude, I would ask you to spread the message to your family, your children, and to all your friends who you meet, and tell them how important a role was played by Allama Iqbal in the creation of this country, along with Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Thank you.
Very well spoken, Dakat. And I think, given the fact that you were unwell, I think the words that came out really resonated with the passion and the feeling that you have, like you said, the germination of the idea in 1980. Many people have vision. Many people have vision. Many people who have a vision seldom live to create it. That's what happened to Allama Iqbal. But one thing I must tell you, that knowing Liaquat for many years, he was predecessor as the chairman of Karachi Council for Foreign Relations, and I looked up to him. He's been a friend for a long time. You can see the character of the Quaid-e-Azam coming down, and down the years. And I think one thing, a small thing, but for example, even the tea and the samosas we have in board meetings and all, he does not allow it to be paid for. Either he pays for it once or I pay for it. He makes sure that nothing is charged to the administration. So I think it shows, the character shows. And similarly, I have great pleasure in inviting Senator Iqbal. Your father, was an icon also. Leaving aside your grandfather, whom Jack has spoken about, your father was an icon, your mother was an icon, and it continues. And the way you reacted when I proposed this to you, because I told you that, look at this, so many years have elapsed, and we do not have the people who founded Pakistan speak about each other. You can speak about Allama Iqbal and Liaquat can speak about Jinnah, but to speak about each other, to speak about your forefathers, and therefore it gives me great pleasure in inviting Senator Iqbal today. Thank you.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम, इय्याका नअबुदु व इय्याका नस्तईन। अल्लाह हम तेरी ही इबादत करते हैं और तुझी से मदद मांगते हैं। Honorable hosts for this afternoon, Mr. Ikram Saigal and Commodore Sadeed, Honorable guest speaker, Mr. Liaquat Merchant, Senior Advocate, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I'm very happy to be here in Karachi at what would appear to be a critical juncture in Pakistan's history, Pakistan's political, constitutional history. And on a lighter note, I'll start first. As Mr. Ikram Saigal said, since I'm specially here all the way from Lahore, and Mr. Ikram Saigal said about the example that our father of the nation, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, had set in terms of austerity and proper use of national resources. Today, if you will be kind enough, please do send to me the bill for the samosas and the tea. I will pick up the tab. I am asked to talk about Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the father of the nation, the founder of our country as an independent state, and a great hero for all of us. And when I would be talking about Quaid-e-Azam, it would be not just about him as a person, it would be about two elements in Pakistan's history. The principles that gave us this country and the leadership that gave us this country. So talking about Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah is like talking about certain principles and certain leadership. And as far back as one can go, the important milestones start in 1930 with the Allahabad address, and they see some sort of a culmination in the Lahore resolution, which was passed on the 23rd of March. Well, it was the annual session spread over 22nd, 23rd and 24th of March at Minto Park, now Iqbal Park, Lahore. And the resolution so passed was called the Lahore Resolution, later on became the Pakistan Resolution. And we just this week celebrated the 82nd anniversary of the passing of that resolution. We are celebrating the 75th year of Pakistan's independence. So it is through the personality of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah important to go back to those principles and to that leadership that gave us Pakistan. And because I think a starting point should be the 23rd March resolution, it had two substantive parts in 1940. First was about independence and sovereignty. It was a demand for independence and sovereignty. That's the first pillar on which the 23rd March resolution stands. The second pillar is about the protection of the rights of minorities. It is a demand and a promise by the Muslims of India that where they are in majority, they will protect the rights of the minorities administratively, religious rights, administrative rights, economic, cultural, political, etc. Likewise, that promise was coupled with a demand in that resolution. That demand was that where the Muslims are in a minority, those rights will be protected by those who are in the majority. Those same religious and cultural and political and economic and administrative rights. And those two principles are expounded by Allama Iqbal in his address of 1930 at Allahabad on the 29th of December that year, 10 years earlier. And I quote to you, those are the famous words from that address: I would like to see the Punjab, northwest frontier, Sindh and Balochistan amalgamated into a single state, self-governed within the British Empire or without the British Empire. The formation of a consolidated northwest Indian Muslim state appears to me to be the final destiny of the Muslims, at least of northwest India. So that independence and sovereignty, the seeds of that had been sowed in 1930, which found their way into the resolution of 1940. On safeguarding of minority rights, the Allahabad address has other stuff in it also. But for this small paragraph, other than this small sentence or paragraph about independence and sovereignty, Allama Iqbal says, a community which is inspired by feelings of ill will towards other communities is low and ignoble. I entertain the highest respect for the customs, laws, religious and social institutions of other communities. Nay, he says in the Allahabad address, nay, it is my duty, according to the teaching of the Quran, even to defend their places of worship, if need be. He hasn't made the necessary reference, but it is believed that he was referring to Surah number 20 and ayat number 40, where in the Quran it is said, if God had not created the group of Muslims to ward off the others from aggression, then churches, synagogues, oratories and mosques where God is worshipped most would have been destroyed. I also want to submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, the consonance between the ideas of Allama Iqbal and Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Going back to 1930, I told you there are many other things in the address of 1930 other than that one paragraph about independence and the dream of a new state or a separate state. In 1929, Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, then known as just Mr. Jinnah, presented his 14 points. The first of those 14 points said, the form of the future constitution should be federal, with the residuary powers to be vested in the provinces. This is 1929. The form of the future constitution should be federal, with the residuary powers to be vested in the provinces. On the 29th of December 1930, 1 year later, Allama Iqbal in the Allahabad address states, to my mind, a unitary form of government is simply unthinkable in self-governing India. What is called residuary powers, he writes in quotation marks, must be left entirely to self-governing states, with the central federal state exercising only those powers which are expressly vested in it. Ladies and gentlemen, as we take stock, of those principles and that leadership, where do we stand on all of these matters? I want to posit to you what Allama Iqbal said in 1930 about leadership in that same address. And at that time, he felt that the Muslims of India suffered from various crises. And the one that he refers to, he says, let me tell you frankly, this is towards the end of his Allahabad address. Let me tell you frankly that at the present moment, the Muslims of India are suffering from two evils. The first is the want of personalities. I'm leaving aside the second evil. He says the first is the want of personalities. The community has failed to produce leaders. And then he describes what the leader should be. He says, by leaders, I mean men who, by divine gift or experience, possess a keen perception of the spirit and destiny of Islam, along with an equally keen perception of the trend of modern history. A keen perception of the spirit and destiny of Islam, number one, with an equally keen perception of the trend of modern history. And then he says in the Allahabad address, such men are really the driving forces of a people, but they are God's gift and cannot be made to order. In 1930, he felt that the Muslims of India had no leader. And in 1936, in May, I'm sure my father, when he was invited by Mr. Liaquat Merchant on both occasions, would have repeated that story from his own personal history, which I only reiterate secondhand, that in May 1936, he writes that my father, in his memoirs, he said, my father, Allama Iqbal, told me an important personality is coming, and he knew I was fond of getting autographs for people, so he said, when he comes, you will be invited inside, and you present your autograph book and get this person's autograph. So he said, I went inside the room when this guest came, and I saw this elegantly dressed man with a very sharp vision, and a lady in a white gharara, a very respectable lady in a white gharara. And I went inside and I gave my autograph book I put it in front of the guest, and the first question came in English, are you also a poet? And he said, he was 14 years old, maybe 15. He said, I'm sorry, he was 11 or 12 years old, my father. He said, no sir. He said, then what do you want? Next question came. Then what do you want to become when you grow up? So a child of 11 or 12, when such a powerful and personality, such a great, awesome personality is sitting there, had no answer. So he laughed and asked his host, your son is not answering. I asked him, what does he want to become when he grows up? So his host, Allama Iqbal, told the guest that he will not answer. Because he is waiting for you to tell him what to become when you grow up, when he grows up. So my father writes in his memoirs, that was my first meeting with the father of the nation, Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Mohtarma Fatima Jinnah. At that time, the concept or the name of Pakistan had not emerged yet, and hardly anybody knew, this is important, he said, hardly anybody knew Mr. Jinnah in the Punjab. But I could tell from that one meeting, how much my father respected him. And 1 year later, when Allama was in his deathbed, there's another story about which there is popular folklore. Again, my father was asked by Allama Iqbal that today Pandit Nehru is going to come and see me. So I can't get out of bed. You go and receive him along with my attendant. So he said, we were waiting in the veranda. I asked my father, who is Pandit Nehru? So he said, Pandit Nehru, just like Muhammad Ali Jinnah is the leader of the Muslims, Pandit Nehru is the leader of the Hindus in India. So he said, we were waiting in the veranda, and Pandit Nehru got out of his car, and two Congress leaders, husband and wife, came with him. And he passed me, I said, Assalamu alaikum. So he joined both his hands and said, Namaskar. And he put his arm around me and he walked until my father's bedroom. My father didn't go inside for that meeting, but what is believed and what is known and what is said about that meeting is that Pandit Nehru came and sat cross-legged on the floor, along with, obviously, his two companions also sat cross-legged on the floor with him, for reasons of protocol. So Dr. Iqbal said, Pandit ji, please sit on the sofa. He said, no, Dr. Iqbal, your level is this and my level is this, let me sit here. And then in the course of the conversation, he had come to ask after his health, Mizaj Pursi in Urdu. So in the course of the conversation, he is known to have said, Dr. Iqbal, who knows about Muhammad Ali Jinnah over here? You are the real leader of the Muslims. When Dr. Iqbal heard this, popular folklore has it, when Dr. Iqbal heard this, he was so angered and his face was so reddened in anger that he said to Pandit Nehru, this is what you have come to do my Mizaj Pursi about? You ask about my health? I am a soldier of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. You please leave my home. And that is how because he had found that person, that personality which fit into the qualities that he had articulated in his address of 1930. He had decided that this man is going to lead the Muslims. Then no force on earth could make Dr. Iqbal back off from there, including the temptation that Pandit Nehru had thrown at him, that you are the real leader of the Muslims. And he was asked also at that point, this is the mid-1930s, 1936 and 1937, that why have you chosen this leader, why this man? And Allama answered, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, because he is incorruptible and unpurchasable. Na to wo ek beimaan hai aur na usko kharida ja sakta hai. And I want to now just make brief references, as Mr. Jaqat Merchant already did. There are 13 letters that Allama wrote to Quaid in 1936 and 1937, which are published. They give a blueprint of what he had in mind about the nation that he had dreamt of, and about the leadership and the steps that he was wanting Muhammad Ali Jinnah as Quaid-e-Azam. At that time, he was still not known as Quaid-e-Azam, to take. But Quaid-e-Azam himself had preserved those letters. He had them published in 1946. He wrote the preface, and he directed the publisher that all the proceeds of this booklet, it was published, the letters were published as a booklet, will go to the funds of the All India Muslim League that he was leading. In the preface, Quaid-e-Azam writes, "The letters which form the subject of this booklet were written to me by the sage, philosopher and national poet of Islam, the late Dr. Sir Muhammad Iqbal, during the period May 1936 to November 1937, a few months before his death. This period synchronizes with a very eventful period in the history of Muslim India." He writes, his views, Quaid is writing about Iqbal, his views were substantially in consonance with my own and had finally led me to the same conclusion as a result of careful examination of the constitutional problems facing India, and found expression in due course in the united will of Muslim India as adumbrated in the Lahore resolution of the All India Muslim League, popularly known as the Pakistan Resolution, passed on 23rd March 1940. From the letter dated 20, and all the letters start with the words, "My dear Mr. Jinnah," and end with the words, "Yours sincerely, Muhammad Iqbal." He writes, "My dear Mr. Jinnah, I know you are a busy man, but I do hope," Mr. Jaqat Merchant has already provided an excerpt, but I am providing you a bigger excerpt. "I know you are a busy man, but I do hope you won't mind my writing to you so often, as you are the only Muslim in India today to whom the community has the right to look up for safe guidance through the storm which is coming to northwest India and perhaps the whole of India." He writes, "My dear Mr. Jinnah, I have no doubt that you fully realize the gravity of the situation as far as Muslim India is concerned. The League will have to finally decide whether it will remain a body representing the upper classes of Indian Muslims or Muslim masses who have so far for good reason taken no interest in it. Personally, I believe that a political organization which gives no promise of improving the lot of the average Muslim cannot attract our masses." He writes, "The problem of bread is becoming more and more acute. The question therefore is, how is it possible to solve the problem of Muslim poverty?" He writes, "Happily, there is a solution in the enforcement of the law of Islam and its further development in the light of modern ideas." This is the letter dated 28th of May 1937. He writes, "My dear Mr. Jinnah, after a long and careful study of Islamic law, I have come to the conclusion that if this system of law is properly understood and applied, at last the right of subsistence is secured. The right of subsistence is secured to everybody." But he says the enforcement and development of the Shariat of Islam is impossible in this country without a free Muslim state. This has been my honest conviction for many years, and I still believe this to be the only way to solve the problem of bread for Muslims as well as to secure a peaceful India. And in conclusion, he writes, "For Islam, the acceptance of social democracy. For Islam, the acceptance of social democracy in some suitable form and consistent with the legal principles of Islam is not a revolution, but a return to the original purity of Islam." He writes, "My dear Mr. Jinnah, Muslim India hopes that at this serious juncture, your genius will discover some way out of our present difficulties." 28th of May 1937. He writes, "Dear Mr. Jinnah, my dear Mr. Jinnah, the Congress President has denied the political existence of Muslims in no unmistakable terms. The other Hindu political body, the Mahasabha, who I regard as the real representative of the masses of the Hindus, has declared more than once that a united Hindu-Muslim nation is impossible in India. In these circumstances, it is obvious that the only way to a peaceful India is a redistribution of the country. on the lines of racial, religious and linguistic affinities. A separate federation of Muslim provinces, reformed on the lines I have suggested above, is the only course by which we can secure a peaceful India and save Muslims from the domination of non-Muslims. He writes, why should not the Muslims of Northwest India and Bengal be considered as nations entitled to self-determination, just as other nations in India and outside India are? The letter dated 21st of June 1937. He writes on the 7th of October 1937, my dear Mr. Jinnah, we are living in difficult times and the Indian Muslims expect that your teachings will give them the clearest possible lead in all matters relating to the future of the community. He writes on the 30th of October 1937, one of the last letters, my dear Mr. Jinnah, we must carry the work of organization more vigorously than ever and should not rest till Muslim governments are established in the 5 provinces and reforms are granted to Balochistan. So, the kind of correspondence, the exchange of ideas, the thoughts and feelings Allama had about Jinnah, and the kind of messages he wanted to convey, because he felt that this leader was the embodiment of those qualities that an ideal leader is possessed of. The keen perception of the spirit and destiny of Islam, the equally keen perception of modern times, and 6 more things that Iqbal has said about leadership. Nigah buland, sukhan dil nawaz, jaan pursoz. These 3 qualities: vision, Nigah buland, sukhan dil nawaz, a great communicator, jaan pursoz, somebody who can empathize with the masses. Yehi hai rakhte safar mere karwan ke liye. 3 more qualities: sabak phir pad sadakat ka, adalat ka, shujaat ka. Sadakat, truthfulness, honesty. Adalat, justice. Shujaat, courage. Liya jayega tujhse kaam, dunya ki imamat ka. So, in conclusion, the principles and the leadership that emerged between Allama's thoughts and Quaid's personality and his actions. Number 1, independence. Number 2, sovereignty. Number 3, self-determination. Number 4, safeguarding minority rights. Number 5, a federal structure. Number 6, a social democracy, which is a return to the original purity of Islam. Number 7, a leader who grasps the spirit and destiny of Islam and also grasps the trend of modern history. Number 8, a leader who can ride through the storm. Number 9, a leader who is incorruptible and unpurchasable. Number 10, a leader who believes in the politics of the masses and not of the upper classes or the elites. Number 11, a leader who is organized. Number 12, a leader who is a visionary. Number 13, a leader who is a sharp communicator. Number 14, a leader who has empathy with others. And number 15, a leader who is truthful, just and courageous. These were the principles. This was the leadership that gave us Pakistan. When we take stock on the 26th of March 2022, we need to ask ourselves these questions. How much have we adhered to these principles, and how much of these qualities are possessed by our existing leadership? Here lies the answer, and there lies the solution to the overcoming of all our challenges. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
With all due respects to Liaquat and Senator Iqbal, in our wildest imagination, neither Allama Iqbal or Muhammad Ali Jinnah thought that our beloved legislators would overnight turn into horses, So if they turn, they could not, even in the nightmares, they could not have thought about it. So I think we've had a very good this thing, and I think in the, let us say, in the last exchange, also the democratic way of disagreeing, with respect to each other, right? That is the essence of it all. In the end, it doesn't matter what the thing is. Said democracy. We need democracy. We do not need an authoritarian state, right? We need democracy. And I think if you look at it, we are thinking, I must end here. Before that, I have Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for this being here at this event. Obviously, the room was planned, so we had invited limited number of guests, but this was live streaming. We, of course, a lot of material will be available tomorrow. I'm sure our media people, the mediators, always do a good job, and I wish to acknowledge our people like within our from Jinnah society and from KCFR, that is merchant. I wish to acknowledge Commodore Sadiq Malik, whose work has been absolutely brilliant and wonderful, because it is he, along with a team of people led by Colonel Ashraf, who has arranged this at short notice, always been a terrific thing. I will also wish to acknowledge senior people from KCFR, Admiral Khalid Mir, Air Marshal Riazuddin Sheikh, Dr. Irfan Haider, everybody. I can name a lot of people here, and I'm very grateful to you for coming. Thank you very much.